Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. We are starting out in low Earth orbit today at Kauai Potato Station, where we are going to commence Operation Space Boop. We have little Dory here, the lunar shuttle that is usually responsible for taking crews from our low Earth orbit station to our low lunar orbit station, Tremonia, although it has been kind of parked for a good long while as we wait to restart our lunar program. But it has a avionics core on board and can be flown autonomously if the need should arise. And because our misaligned cargo pod is in a similar inclination, it should not take much at all for little Dory here to make rendezvous and then proceed to gently nudge the kerosene and liquid oxygen fueled filled tug into a better orientation to get its solar panels into the sun. So there is a quick burn and a follow-up burn to bring our separation at closest approach down to a manageable level. We've got about 7 days before our last launch of this window can commence, so with a week to kill, I figured, hey, why not? We've managed to work our separation at closest approach down to about 10 kilometers, so we'll just keep tapping on the thrusters until we can find ourselves a new node to walk this down even further. About a half orbit away, and yeah, it's all radial. We're just within a couple of degrees of one another, so it really did not take very much fuel to make this rendezvous a thing at all, although we did fully fuel little Dory here just in case things, I don't know, went south or we had to make radical adjustments to our orbit. But there we have a separation down to about 300 meters. And so we'll get ourselves angled in very, very eventually, and then time warp right past it. Good job, me. A little extra burn on those engines puts us back on course, and now we can start dialing ourselves in, make an about face, and try to zero out some of the rest of this. So we have made rendezvous. Finally, unfortunately, we are in the dark, currently behind Earth's shadow. So we thought it might be best to wait until daylight to nudge this thing around just so we can get an immediate response from the vehicle to see if our little nudging had worked. So to protect our solar panels, we will fold them in, bring ourselves to within a few meters, and then park and wait for daylight. All right, we are go for Operation Boop. Probably change our angle. Nope. Yep. That looks pretty good. Alt F5, please. Good call. Thank you. Thank you, Wookie. Thank you, Wookie, for once again saving my keister. Peasley Pig, welcome back. We are performing a surgical boop on our stranded and powerless supply pod, hoping to be able to restore solar panels to, or solar energy to it. Boop. We're gonna have to really lean into this boop. Was that enough? I do not see the solar panels articulating. Is the target spinning? Target is spinning. Just not in the way we would have liked. Nose to nones. It is definitely spinning. I think we've got some light on that panel. Switch vessels. Do we have connection? Look at that! Yes! Oh, RCS to arm. Yes! Hooah! Oh, exposure 1.0, 1.0. Time warp it. Hold it. Yes! Congratulations. Ground crews, excellent work. How's our charge looking? We are charging immensely well. Despite this craft's best efforts to reorient itself in an undesirable way. Thank you, Grathen. Puckers. That is a solid orientation there. Bump, bump. Victory. Yes. Should we send this to Mars? We've still got more than 6.5 days until our next launch has to go up. So the verdict was yes. Yes, we're gonna. We will just leave Dory here in orbit. We're gonna pull her away to a reasonable safe distance, and also re-extend the solar panels to make sure this vehicle doesn't get stranded, although we will have to bring her back to Tremonia Station, or I'm sorry, Kauai Potato Station at some point here. So that was looking a little uncomfortable, so we'll fire our thrusters to correct, make sure we're not going to come back around and reboop our booped target before getting ready for our transfer burn. Of course, I would have walked right past it, so we're going to go one more orbit, trying to avoid as much of this boil off as we can, although we do have those radiators on, and I think there was just enough RTG power to keep them somewhat functional. But we do have a node plotted now. It is well within tolerance, so we'll just light that single HG3, make sure we're clear of Dory on the way out the door, and burn this fuel tank for Mars. Now, there's just a little bit of a beauty shot. It does look absolutely magnificent, even streaking across the dark side of the planet here. This is probably one of my all-time favorite angles in which to film ejection burns, as I'm sure most of you know at this point. But once again, I forgot to remove most of the ablator from the heat shield. We probably could have saved, I don't know, 4 or 5 tons off this payload. It's always the little details like this that'll kill me, and considering a couple of, I guess after this one got stranded, before the stream before this one, I went back in and added batteries to it to try to avoid this problem in the future, and completely forgot to make adjustments to the heat shield. So go me, yep, fully stocked. This one would be very appropriate for a refueling at Venus. A little overkill for trying to get it to Mars, but you know, we're here, we're within our Delta V threshold, so I don't think it's going to be the worst thing in the world to just have a fully stocked heat shield, although strictly speaking, we don't need it, and I hope all of you could pay better attention to detail than me and maybe get that little detail right. You don't need all the ablator on your lunar rated heat shields to aero capture at Mars. So with our ejection burn pretty much finished off, we're just gonna try a little bit of a correction, and this one is relatively minor, although we will be plotting a mid-course correction at some point to adjust for the rest of this inclination. We would like to arrive at Mars as similar an inclination to Harmonia Station as we can possibly manage. It makes everything a whole lot easier, because the biggest expenditure of fuel when we get to Mars is adjusting for inclination relative to the station after our capture burn, especially with these aero captured things where you can't really decide what your resultant apoapsis is going to be. So we'll dial in this mid-course correction to get us as close as we can to that. We'll probably make some touch-ups on that, and then save it for the node and moving along. Now this is our Europa Clipper mission. I think I've mentioned many times that this mission is kind of running out of time, and it's going to be a huge financial hit If we are unsuccessful. Now, our orbit is such that gravity assist flybys of Callisto are not going to give us much benefit because our relative velocity is just a little too high. So we will probably have to make some boosting burns to deal with that in the future. But the idea here was to use Callisto to gravity assist our orbit up to Europa, and then use Europa to gravity assist down into a capture orbit, and then make our landing approach. Now we get 2.8 kilometers per second in our transfer stage, and another 2.2, 2.4-ish in our lander stage, and just not a whole lot of time to work with. But even just kind of burning for broke around any of this is way out of budget for us. So our first step was to get our apoapsis just a little above Callisto orbit, and so that we can make an inclination change relative to our target. Their inclinations are relatively similar, so it kind of works the same both ways. As long as we can keep all of our flybys along that equatorial plane, we shouldn't throw off our inclination too much. But now we need to see when our next free flyby is, and there's a pretty close one in 78 days, but it's not quite good enough or worth correcting for. But we do get a freebie in a couple hundred days. We'll set the node for it because it's the best we're going to do right now. 189 days, give or take. So at least that gives us some time to try to plot this out a little bit better in the future, perhaps. But I'm just not very good at gravity assisting. And finally, we are on to our last launch of this Mars window, and this is the basket, as we've been calling it before, although I think we've officially titled it the Ascent Stage Shield Heat, or ASH for short. So our ASH basket is finally coupled to its transfer stage and its rendezvous stage, bolted to the top of a DN6 Delta, and is finally on its way to Mars. This is the one we were kind of waiting for to get through production, because I guess we ran out of spare DN6 parts. Plus, the build time on SRBs is not really kind, and I did kind of prioritize everything else because this is the last thing that I got around to designing and trying to figure out the details on how to bring it to Harmonia Station after the capture events and such. So it did take a little while longer. It is much more part heavy than I think any of our surface-based modules, so the frame rate and the part count and the build time they definitely suffered. But boosters have happened a while ago. There go our main boosters. Again, fairings up, and I just had to take a quick peek in there to make sure we didn't pop any tires on the way up. If you remember our original deployment of this Mars landing vehicle, I guess you'd call it, showed up, and the rover that would normally be responsible for transporting the crew from the landing site to the surface base, all the tires were blown. And I have no idea at what point that happened. So I just wanted to make sure if it was on launch, then we need to figure something out around there. If not, then we'll figure it out later. But we can't have this thing showing up with four blown tires. That makes it almost useless unless you can get a very precise landing, which I have every doubt in the world that I can do. So also the decision was made to just kind of burn the core stage to completion and then separate it off in hopes that, hey, maybe we're somewhere near the right kinda position for our Mars ejection. Turns out, nah, we were a little bit off. I don't think it actually saved us any Delta V at all. But still only 3.7 kilometers per second, which is well within our budget. We're also not going to repeat the same mistake and make sure that we are tilted with our solar panels into the sun. Now we don't have any kerosene on this. All of the upper stage and all of the rendezvous stuff is going to happen with nitrogen tetroxide. So, and Aerosine 50. Oof, that was a bit of a brain fart. But we are, since we're so much higher in our altitude now, we're actually burning a little bit into the daylight, and it's a nice long burn. We're just going to take the time to make sure our thruster fuel uh, for the landing stage itself is locked. I'd like to preserve as much of that fuel as possible because we're kind of running a little low at Harmonia. We actually will probably need to empty out everything that's in the Chestnut crewed vehicle into the ascent stage to get it fully fueled and prepped for its initial crewed descent. So really, the more that this can show up with, the better shape we're going to be in. We'll need all of those thruster packs to help guide us down during our Mars deorbiting maneuvers. And of course, there's a big tank with more thrusters on the bottom of this carry fairing that will be responsible for getting it from whatever its parking orbit results as to Harmonia Station. And hopefully we'll have a little bit left that we can transfer fuel into something, so perhaps there's also going to be a massive frame rate hit when we try to dock this thing. Part count at Harmonia is getting a little out of control, but that's really nothing new for me. But the system, we've simulated it so much, I've run so much testing on this thing, we know it can work. All I have to do is not screw it up, and we'll be in good shape. Just really the hard part, or the next hard part, I should say, is going to be docking this thing successfully to the ascent stage. That, in and of itself, is probably going to be a good 3-hour stream. Hopefully I can take care of it, not on stream, but knowing my schedule lately, probably not. So we are going to be leaving Earth's sphere of influence as we round out the last kilometer per second in this burn, and looks like we'll definitely have enough left in these tanks to do adequate corrections and maybe even give ourselves a little nudge before we have to start making our Aero capture pass at Mars. We're just waiting for that rendezvous. There it is, and we'll walk it in just a little bit on RCS. Get it to a nice place where hopefully all we have to do is make a plane change correction, which we'll try to do just a little further out. There's our mid-course, and that's where we'll try to dial it in. We'll just, yeah, coming in just a little too aggressively there, but it's looking pretty good, and it's real cheap, and we've still got 1200 meters per second in our main tank. So this is actually well on its way to being extraordinarily successful. We've got our alarm set, so we'll come back to all of these in about 60 days, but that's going to do it for this episode, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you in the next one. So until then, see you later.